We're taking a look back at the biggest political turning points, trends, and controversies as we hit rewind on Rising. We've got the power players, scandals, and outrageous decisions that have defined our conversations. Investigative journalist Lee Fang wrote yesterday, Epstein sent many rambling emails suggesting projects with Bill Gates. Asked to prep presentations for new Gates-backed foundation, $100 million minimum investment expanding on exchanging prior Gates-related interests like vaccines and maternal care. In one of those emails from February 25th, 2011, Epstein reportedly wrote, Gates guy here today, no reporters, I took care of that. Stay calm and focused. We need to speak. I am staying until very late tonight. Seeing Gates read donor on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Wednesday set aside for 2-3 hours to discuss exactly this.
This comes as more information on Epstein's dealings are coming to light amid J.P. Morgan's fresh accusations over ties to the accused sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, so these are, filings from this J.P. Morgan Virgin Islands lawsuit. So just more and more emails from J.P. Morgan officials, Epstein talking about it, just all the influential, important people with lots of money that Epstein was connecting to government officials at the island, to the bank as well. His ongoing kind of relationship with Gates, which is, these messages to Gates people are 2011. So that's after he's already a known sex offender. He's been convicted. He got his house arrest or whatever kind of deal he got for sexual misconduct with underage girls. So you can't say, oh, I didn't know. It was known. It was known by then. There's some joking about Miley Cyrus, who at the time of this is 15. She's a Disney star at the time. So that's a clear inclination of an awareness of exactly the kind of thing Epstein goes for. It's disgusting.
Yeah. I think
very disgusting.
It's a bit of a lens into what the world is like for bankers in America at the very high level. The emails that Lee Fang posted to Twitter, you have one from a Mary Erdoes at jpmorgan.com official email to an unknown person saying, obviously they're at a party. This is, really late at night. The first email is about 8:30. This has turned into a cheesy broker fest. Totally not cool. The only cool people here are at Glenn's table. Same as bat mitzvah. So maybe they've known each other for some time. The response is at 1:20 a.m. Epstein there with Miley Cyrus. And so this is like official J.P. Morgan emails where this exchange is happening. Was Epstein actually there with Miley Cyrus? We don't know. But the fact that they made the joke shows that these bankers on their J.P. Morgan emails are comfortable joking about the billionaire being out with young girls.
They were comfortable joking about a lot of really sketchy stuff. We've read these emails in the past talking about who's your favorite Disney princess. It suggests a deep familiarity with the kind of bad and illegal stuff that Jeffrey Epstein was interested in and had already been convicted for, would eventually be arrested for again. Yet right up until the very end, I've talked about this several times, but I think it's always worth bringing up, including given her recent crusade, the higher media profile she has sought for herself as part of the pushback from Democrats on Twitter files and on RFK Jr. Stacey Plaskett, the delegate of the Virgin Islands, has been front and center at these hearings, accusing Matt Taibbi of perjury, accusing RFK Jr. of anti-Semitism. Stacey Plaskett, delegate of the Virgin Islands, trying to get Jeffrey Epstein at her fundraisers as recently as 2018, I believe, the year before he was arrested again and then died in allegedly because of suicide in prison. This was someone with full knowledge and awareness of his wrongdoing, was courting his influence, his access to funds and to important wealthy people.
Right. Plaskett, who originally said that she wasn't really aware that he was donating. She was completely unaware of his donations to her campaign, which, then she had to say in deposition last month.
It's just a lie.
Yeah, she was directly introduced.
Yeah, you can see the emails from her team saying, oh, he's going to be there, right? Let's make sure he gets a personal invite.
Not just for the political dealings, but was an attorney at the tax firm that worked with Jeffrey Epstein. So even before she ran for public office, she knew Jeffrey Epstein. But then there's obvious documents where she's asking that he be invited to the events. She was clearly aware, most likely directly had been speaking with Jeffrey Epstein.
And Jeffrey Epstein, had his own agenda for the Virgin Islands. He wanted the sex offender policies of the Virgin Islands changed. Wonder why that could be. He was paying for some government officials, I think, schooling for their kids. This is, and this is something I've, again, mentioned when we talk about this lawsuit, but because the lawsuit is from Virgin Islands to JP Morgan, but it seems pretty clear that a lot of the government officials of the Virgin Islands were very much complicit in the exact kind of nefarious, we'll find out if it's illegal, who knows, but very icky behavior that they're going after JP Morgan for their relationship to Jeffrey Epstein, that they are complicit as well. So whatever they recoup from JP Morgan as a result of this lawsuit, if this is just, going to build like a nicer, governor's mansion or something or whatever it is in the Virgin Islands, that'll be pretty ridiculous because they're all over this too. So it is the victims of Jeffrey Epstein who need to be made whole again, not powerful people who were well aware of this pattern of abuse for 15 years.
Or maybe, do the job of passing some anti-corruption legislation. Not only was Epstein donating to Plaskett's campaign, there was an email where an aide wrote to Epstein to confirm that a $13,000 corporate donation planned for the Democratic Party, not the Plaskett campaign, would be made, quote, for the benefit of Stacey Plaskett. So this exceeds the amount that you can donate in an election cycle to an individual candidate. And this shows the kind of shady dealing that goes on between very rich donors like Jeffrey Epstein and PACs or political campaigns, right? You're circumventing FEC regulations by saying, I'm giving this money to the Democratic Party because I can give an unlimited amount, but I'm letting you know that this needs to go to the benefit of Stacey Plaskett, which is not a decision the donor can make. That's a decision that the party needs to make of what to do with that money. And so that's a pretty damning facet of this whole expose as well of what's going on in the Virgin Islands. And, she's a delegate to Congress and she's risen to a pretty prominent position as well.
Yeah, she's been all over, as I said, the Twitter Files hearing. She grilled Taibbi and Schellenberger. She accused Taibbi of making up, of getting things wrong, and it way overplayed her hand there. And then at this RFK Jr. hearing last week, she was one of the people, saying things that I don't think. That I think are exaggerations and mischaracterizations of what RFK Jr. said. She's positioning herself as very much part of the Democratic, establishment, pushing back on people who are questioning government abuse related to social media and speech and all sorts of other things. But she has, some things to be looked at for.
Yeah, podcaster Joe Rogan actually suggested that Bill Clinton was blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein, who hung up a painting of Clinton in his home. Let's watch this.
Why do you think Epstein had that giant painting of Bill Clinton in a dress in his foyer?
Dude.
Do you know that picture?
Yeah.
That painting? Epstein's
taste in art was not great. Like, if you look at the shit...
No, that was great. That painting is like, I got you, bitch. That's what that is.
Oh, right.
You got...
I'm going to see if I can put the painting up on screen. What do you think about the blackmailing of Bill Clinton?
So I love the way the response goes by his guest there on the podcast of Joe Rogan, because it wasn't like, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton were obviously very close for him to have this painting commissioned. It was, his taste in art's pretty bad. I wouldn't want Bill Clinton in a dress on the wall. It's a hilarious response.
Well, it's not. So let's put it. So there it is.
Yeah.
So it's not actually. I don't think. So Bill Clinton. Forgive me if I'm wrong.
He didn't pose
for this. Somebody else posed for it, and it was painted, and then they just painted it to look like Bill Clinton's face. So the idea that I don't think this is evidence of that he's being black. Like, he was public knowledge. This painting. Well, I guess it later became public knowledge, but it's not. He wasn't trying to. Bill Clinton wasn't like trying to prevent this painting from getting out or something. Like, he didn't pose for it. It was just like anyone could do this. So as evidence of blackmail, I don't know that it really amounts to anything.
No,
personally.
But hilarious.
Hilarious nonetheless.
Hilarious. It's giving, it doesn't sound right because the client is Jeffrey Epstein, but paint me like one of your French girls.
Yeah.
But that has a whole different connotation given the Epstein situation. I think the documents that are coming out, thanks to them looking into this JP Morgan case, are fascinating because we also have documents coming out alleging that Jeffrey Epstein helped connect JP Morgan to high-profile clients, like the Google co-founder Sergey Brin. I think there's just going to be more and more stuff coming out because a lot of these documents are going to be, disclosed to the public thanks to this case.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue to follow that, and we'll have more Rising right after this. Hello and welcome to Rising. We have a momentous show for you today. We're going to get right into a story that I know many of our regular viewers have a lot of interest in, and there was finally some serious disclosures that we're, of course, talking about the Epstein news. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, Robbie, the day is finally here. Last night, dozens of pages of previously unsealed Jeffrey Epstein court documents were finally released. Last month, New York Judge Loretta Preska ordered the release of the names of approximately 150 people who were included in previously redacted parts of a settled civil suit against Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's associate and former girlfriend. The names from the suit filed by one of Epstein's victims, Virginia Giuffre, were originally withheld on the grounds of privacy. About 40 documents in total were released last night. The remainder will unseal on a rolling basis over the coming days.
So who exactly showed up in these documents thus far? So as was previously reported, former President Bill Clinton's name appears over 50 times in the unsealed filings, with one victim testifying that Epstein confided the Clinton, quote, liked them young. Clinton is joined in the documents by former President Donald Trump, who Epstein often, quote, called up for trips to Atlantic City. Lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who, of course, has admitted to knowing Epstein, serving as his legal counsel, but denied all wrongdoing. He's also in there. Former modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel was found dead in his cell while on trial for other sex trafficking charges in 2022. His name appears. Singer Michael Jackson, musician David Copperfield were both spotted by witnesses at Epstein's homes, according to these disclosures. And, of course, Prince Andrew from the UK royal family, who one victim did accuse of groping her in these documents. Also named so far are Hollywood stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Cate Blanchett, Cameron Diaz, not accused, by the way, of any wrongdoing. One victim simply testified that Epstein often bragged of his celebrity connections, including with these stars in particular. So we're keeping a close eye on the documents, and we'll be continuing to cover more names as they are released.
We should also say that David Blaine and Michael Jackson were not accused of wrongdoing in those documents.
Right, certainly. They're, these are documents pertaining to the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell and the accusations of Virginia Giuffre. So these are statements by witnesses who might have said these people were there or in Epstein's circle, or names that he mentioned. Again, that this is a man who actively sought out rich and powerful people and who bragged about his connections to rich and powerful people. So it is not, it doesn't necessarily indicate any wrongdoing. It in fact does not indicate any wrongdoing of any kind for Leonardo DiCaprio, et cetera,
right.
That they appear here. Witnesses are just describing interactions that he had.
Right. Of course, for others that are mentioned, there are actual accusations, and we'll get into those in just a second. Meanwhile, disgraced Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell spoke out on the documents released from her federal prison cell. She said, quote, "It's all about men abusing women for a long period of time, and it's only one person in jail, a woman." I saw at least one commentator noting that this is the logical, fateful end of a kind of liberal identity politics to try to claim
gaslight,
victimhood.
girl boss, gatekeep.
Yes. Yeah. Of all the sex traffickers, only the woman has to pay the price, and we should somehow feel bad for her.
Two of the other accused sex traffickers died in prison, allegedly killed themselves. So that it's not that they were not being attempted to be brought to justice. Now, obviously, people have theories about that Epstein was deliberately killed, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But they haven't gotten off scot-free. They were in the process of being brought to justice.
So let's get into the substance of some of the accusations that were made in the context of these civil suit documents. I'm particularly interested to hear what you made of the Dershowitz allegations, since you had an opportunity to interview him on the show about them, and he's given a number of interviews where he has opined on it, and then, of course, what was it? The witness later retract. One of the accuser.
Yeah, the accusers. So we did really grill. You know, viewers know we've had Dershowitz on the show a number of times to talk about a whole range of legal issues. We also had him on, myself, Ryan Grimm, and Emily Jashinsky, former hosts of Rising. We interviewed him, it's probably a year and a half ago now, about him being accused by Virginia Giuffre, one of the most prominent of the Epstein accusers. And he denied all of it. I think he threatened a kind of countersuit, defamation-based situation, denied all of it, was forthright in admitting that he had many interactions with Epstein, was on the plane. I don't remember the exact other details he got into. People should certainly go back and watch that interview if they want. Subsequent to that, after that, Virginia Giuffre retracted the accusation against Alan Dershowitz, said she was mistaken, she had wrongly identified him. Yeah. So, look, anyone can make of that whatever they want. My only point was that I couldn't, persist in thinking, if someone accuses someone of a crime this serious, of this nature, and then takes it back, I don't know how you can, persist in. I would have to. You'd have to almost continue as believing him, even though the person who accused him no longer does.
Well, it's interesting just, I think, to read for context what he's being accused of in these newly released documents. So it says that then minor, who's called Jane Doe 3 in these documents, says that one such powerful individual that Epstein forced, then minor Jane Doe 3, to have sexual relations with was former Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, a close friend of Epstein and well-known criminal defense attorney. Epstein required Jane Doe 3 to have sexual relations with Dershowitz on numerous occasions while she was a minor, not only in Florida, but also on private planes in New York, New Mexico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. In addition to being a participant in the abuse of Jane Doe 3 and other minors, Dershowitz was an eyewitness to the sexual abuse of many other minors by Epstein and several of Epstein's co-conspirators. Dershowitz would later play a significant role in negotiating a non-prosecution agreement on Epstein's behalf, and so forth and so on.
People should read all of this, and they should hear what he had to say, and they are free to form their own conclusions, is what I would say.
Well, he already has responded to doing an interview, I think precisely because his name was one of the more prominent ones that went trending on Twitter, and a lot of people, and which were a lot of people were talking about. Do we have that clip? I was pretty sure that we were going to play that today, since it's a pretty compelling thing for someone who was so recently accused to come and talk to the press on the same day that those accusations were made, with the assumption that he was going to get ahead of the accusations. It's not clear to me that the interview was received especially well, however.
Yeah, he said that he welcomed the release of these names, that he felt it was clearing of him. Obviously, he's done a number of interviews on the subject with all sorts of people. He did an interview with Kim Iverson, also former host of Rising, on her show on Rumble, where he specifically addressed the accusation that some have made that Jeffrey Epstein was an intelligence agent, either for the U.S. government or I think specifically the Israeli government. Alan Dershowitz obviously having a lot of ties with Israel, being the choice of Benjamin Netanyahu to represent Israel before the International Human Rights Court. So, and Dershowitz denied that he had anything to do with Israel. We do have this clip. Let's play it.
Now, the one point I do want to make is that I understand all the feminist groups and the radicals who think this is the worst thing in the world, that anybody ever had any contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Where are all those radical feminists when it comes to the Hamas rapes of young Jewish girls, sexual abuse, beheadings? They are quiet. They are silent. The incredible hypocrisy of the Me Too movement. Me Too, except if you're a Jew. And I want to have a list of all the radical feminists who are pushing hard, and I understand that, to get all these names revealed. And I want to know how many of them have ever actually condemned Hamas for the rapes that we now know occurred and the murders that occurred. How many have been silent, and how many, like the National Lawyers Guild, have actually approved of what Hamas did? So let's put this in context.
What do you make of that response and conflating those issues?
I mean, I'm not a radical feminist. I absolutely I condemn Hamas daily on the show. I condemn their murder. I condemn the sexual assault that they're guilty of. And I also think it's very important to get to the bottom of the crimes that Jeffrey Epstein is responsible and hold any associates of his that were responsible for sexual misconduct with underage people to account as well.
It does feel interesting to try to shoehorn a kind of identity politics defense that somehow there's a disinterest in sexual assault victims because they're Jewish, but sexual assault perpetrators maybe also because they're Jewish. And it also does seem to me to ignore the fact that the overwhelming majority of people who are interested in this story are normies or liberals who are very condemnatory of both groups of sexual assault. I don't know why he's conflating some ostensible fringe leftist perspective with the overwhelming majority of Americans who are concerned about these accusations of sex trafficking.
I can think of plenty of examples of Me Too, very Me Too involved activist, feminist type people who suddenly went silent when, for instance, it was Joe Biden being accused. I mean, you yourself have been sounding that drum.
Absolutely,
I'm not
but
seeing,
he didn't raise that comparison.
That has happened in the past.
But like the Alyssa Milano Time's Up Me Too crew is very much sympathetic to Israel and the victims of the October 7th attack, and sympathetic to Epstein's victims. That does seem like a bit of a lark. So we'll see if he continues with that line of questioning, and if he'll be willing to come back on the show to talk about these additional this additional news story. Yeah,
and I hope to get more releases from the disclosure soon. Again, I'm particularly interested in the government of the Virgin Islands, given what we know about how they sought to curry favor with Jeffrey Epstein.
Right. Well, as pointed out by Matt Iglesias on Twitter, Trump made U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, who gave Epstein his mysterious sweetheart plea deal, Secretary of Labor. And then when it erupted as a matter of controversy, Acosta just quietly resigned, and nobody ever made him testify before Congress or anything about what happened. Speaking of politics, Robbie, I'm also very interested in the extent to which our own American government and politicians who are now running for president are implicated in this kind of scheme. Donald Trump, of course, had a close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Acosta was literally the architect of the sweetheart plea deal that made it so that after being convicted of sex crimes back in the early aughts, he still was able to get out of jail and continue these kinds of close relationships and to have this position of influence for many years afterward. To make someone like that to give them a chief cabinet position and for that not to have stuck in any way is like a really interesting indictment of what's been going on in our media culture. What people were willing and interested in going after Donald Trump over, Russia, and these kind of very serious and much more substantiated crimes that Acosta associated with seeming to fly right under the radar.
Well, yeah, I mean, Acosta did have to resign when this controversy again became front and center. He did it was a remarkable case of undercharging a crime, something prosecutors aren't often known for. Of course, different defendants get different levels of justice given their access to wealth and power and prestige. You pick up a regular scumbag sex criminal off the street who doesn't have a lot of money. You can give them 40 years because they're not going to be able to fight it powerfully. You take on someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who has
friends in high places
and $1 gazillion and a private island and an ability to drag things out through the court. Maybe you settle for what was unbelievably lenient charges, basically house arrest, an ankle bracelet, and then a total ability to reinsert himself into high society, still hobnob, still call Bill Gates the wealthiest man in the world at the time, and people at like Bank of America say, "Oh, we can't wait to hug and kiss you again." Something like that was in the emails. Really disgusting. And yeah, he did not have to answer. He was never expected to answer as many questions about that as he might have.
Yeah.
So.
All right. We will continue to follow this story as more names are released on a rolling basis. Stay tuned. More Rising next.
Are we witnessing the beginning of some transparency maybe in the Jeffrey Epstein case? Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill Thursday authorizing the release of a cache of documents relating to the late financier and sexual deviant to a grand jury. Speaking at a press conference at the Palm Beach Police Department, DeSantis said Americans deserve to know who was involved in Epstein's sex trafficking operations. Let's watch.
We're now sitting here decades later, and you've had Epstein, and then Maxwell is actually in prison in Florida, and yet nothing else has ever happened. And to not have justice on this is something that has been a big black spot on our justice system. So the legislature, and why did that happen? Well, it happened because you had somebody that was very rich and well connected and was able to engineer an outcome that the average citizen would likely never have been able to do, and that's wrong.
The legislation gives a green light to publicly disclosing documents if the subject of the inquiry is dead, the inquiry involves a minor, the inquiry has been previously disclosed by a court order, and if the state attorney is notified of the revelations. The bill is set to go into effect July 1st. So DeSantis, I think this is a good move. He said nobody should be protected from facing justice due to their wealth or status, and those who harm children should be exposed and punished to the fullest extent of the law. Very agreeable statement from Ron DeSantis. I think the fact that the circuit judge denied the request to release the information, the documents from the grand jury until the law goes into effect in July is a bit ridiculous, but it's really difficult to sit back and watch judges protect the wealthiest people in the country for really no reason at all. Like, there's no reason why these documents shouldn't be released. They're going to likely redact any arguments between the prosecutor and the defense attorney. That's not information you get from the grand jury, but you do get the evidence, which the public has been demanding for quite some time.
Yeah, and this could potentially unveil the full client list. Previously, we got some documents from the Ghislaine Maxwell case released in January of this year, but we didn't get anything related to the client list. Instead, we got some of the previous accusations and reporting on this, which included the names of Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Richard Branson, Stephen Hawking. Bill Gates was mentioned because of an alleged affair that he had. Bill Clinton was named quite a bit because he was apparently trying to kill stories at Vanity Fair on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein. But what this bill would do is give us access to a lot more information in regards to the allegations of the trafficking of minors, because the information that would be released is from that 2006 grand jury indictment. And the 2006 case was when the FBI actually investigated Jeffrey Epstein for a little over a year, I believe. They ended up compiling a report of 34 minors who were eligible for restitution, reporting about the actual investigation from Julie Brown in the Miami Herald. Later found that there were at least 80 victims. She was able to locate about 60 of them. And at the time, what ended up happening was, thanks to negotiations between Alex Acosta, who would later become Labor Secretary, and the famous Harvard lawyer Alan Dershowitz, Jeffrey Epstein ended up getting just an 18-month sentence and had to register as a sex offender and pay restitution to the victims, even though he was originally charged with very serious felonies regarding sexual misconduct with minors. Alex Acosta has said that the reason that he went through with this sweetheart plea deal is because he was told that Jeffrey Epstein was some sort of intelligence agent for the government and that it was over his head and he should leave it alone. So in addition to hearing about who the clients were for Jeffrey Epstein and who else was involved in the alleged trafficking of these minors on a very large scale, I hope that this also helps us get closer to why exactly he was let off the hook so many times. Who was he blackmailing? Who did he have information on? Who was he in cozy with? And who really stood to be the most damaged by the details of this indictment getting out to the general public?
Right. I think there's something that's lacking in our system of justice that was there at its inception, which is this deterrence factor that you'll be publicly shamed for your bad behavior. And it feels like there are some things that are still true of that time. We have members of the royal family being able to pay off people who are victims of crime so that they don't speak about them. You have the wealthiest people being protected by judges. We know that on several occasions in recent years, there have been all kinds of schemes and agreements between judges and corporations, judges and wealthy people, for them to either really enforce the law. In some cases, put people in prison that have no priors, who are minors, to keep up with the contracts that states have around the standard of labor, that they'll keep a certain amount of people in the prisons that are for-profit prisons. And if they don't meet that threshold, that then the state is on the hook to pay with public dollars the remaining amount that's owed to account for those losses. Just the idea of maintaining a certain population of prisoners and judges signing on to this is ridiculous. Of course, we know those judges were caught and they paid hefty fees, but just the fact that this is happening in the United States of America, that we have a justice system that favors the wealthy and works for the wealthy at the expense of everyday people. You have people in Palm Beach County saying that they held their kids really close. They're afraid. They have no idea who was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. That's a really scary reality to live in. And I think, this bill is one step in the right direction, but it definitely is the case that if you can afford expensive lawyers and you can afford to pay certain fees, when you're wealthy, different laws apply to you.
Yeah, it's amazing to see the difference in the way the justice system works in regards to Jeffrey Epstein versus even just some recent cases over the past few years from the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland. We saw the example of the DOJ indicting these people who were allegedly on this spree to try to kidnap the Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. It turned out that most of the movement on that case was perpetrated by FBI informants who were working undercover. We've had a couple of pro-life activists arrested recently and charged with violating the FACE Act for protesting outside of abortion clinics, people who are basically just everyday Americans. The FBI has tried to go undercover in Catholic churches, according to a memo that was released last year or the year before out of the Richmond field office, where they talked about how Catholics could be susceptible to extremism and could become domestic extremists. And all of this just points to a justice system that is more interested in prosecuting everyday Americans for simply exercising their First Amendment rights versus actually holding real criminals accountable. I mean, how many times did the FBI drop the ball on both the Jeffrey Epstein and the Larry Nassar case, right? The Larry Nassar case involving him, he was a gymnast doctor, and he was apparently sexually violating all of these young gymnast girls. And then there's the Sackler family, right, with the opioid epidemic and how they managed to convince all of these doctors to prescribe pills that they claimed weren't addictive, paid doctors all kinds of money in kickbacks if they prescribed the pills, and they've faced no jail time. They've basically just had to pay some fines and haven't really had to even admit any wrongdoing. It's such a miscarriage of justice, and I applaud Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for taking one step in the right direction of trying to get the American people the information that they deserve about all of this. Apologies for going on a little bit of a tangent there, Jessica. We're going to have to leave it there. That's all the time that we have on Rising Friday. But please come back on Monday for more Robbie and Bree and the Rising that you know and love. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks, Jessica. We'll see you next week.
Thanks. Bye, y'all.